Hello, good evening. As always, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, how's my sound? When I tap the microphone, does it sound like I'm tapping this microphone? Because if not, I'm using the wrong microphone. That's important. We need to be using the right microphone. Otherwise, no one can hear the book club. Thank you for joining me. This is the Vampire Book Club. Good evening to you all. I am the Maven of the Eventide, and we read one book each month about vampires or written by a vampire in some way, vampire related. Anything with vampires is game. Most of the books we're trying to read are those books over there on that shelf, or you can't see it, but there's another shelf over there, and then there's two more shelves over there that are full of vampire books in my vampire library. And I need to read them all. And reading by yourself sometimes isn't very motivating. So I started this vampire book club to convince you to read them with me. And we are reading them together one by one. And this month we read The Beautiful by Renee Adia. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I apologize if I'm not. Miss Renee, who wrote this book, actually lives in the same city I do. She grew up in Korea, but she went to college in North Carolina, and now she lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is exactly where I am. So she is, at this moment, if she's home, somewhere within like 15 miles from me. So like her spirit is with us in this book club. Really? Okay, so this is the first of a series. It came out last year. It's pretty recent. And the sequel, The Damned, because you know, The Beautiful and The Damned, get it, just came out recently. And according to Amazon, it's going to be a 5-book series. But Amazon also said that The Damned was book 4 in that 5-book series, so I don't know how accurate that is. And according to Renee, each book is supposed to focus on a different character and can be read alone without having read the previous books, is what she said in an interview that I read. However, the summary of The Damned makes it sound like a direct sequel to this book, and someone in the chat just told me that book 2 also ends on a cliffhanger ending, so I don't know that that's true. If anyone else knows more than I do, please tell me. But I will tell you about this book because I read this book and I had thoughts and feelings, and our book club had a nice discussion about it in our Discord chat. If you would like to join the book club, join our Discord. The link is in the description of all of my videos, so you join the Discord and join the book club. Or you could just join the Discord. If you don't want to be part of the book club, you don't have to be. It is a Discord for all things vampire. I suppose I could have invited her to this book club if she... I don't know. I feel like she's big and famous and she would have no interest in coming to my little tiny book club on this corner of YouTube. So she probably would have very politely told me, no thanks. Oh no, something's wrong with my audio, you say. How's it now? Is the audio still bad? I didn't change anything. Is the audio still staticky? Do I have to call my technical help? What is wrong with my audio? Do I just need to be closer to the microphone? I don't want to say anything interesting until I get this fixed. Closer helps. I'll just stay close. All right, we'll stay close. It's a shotgun mic, so closer will make it happy. Maybe I was just too far away. Gurgly, you say. Well, I apologize. I was getting kind of overly enthusiastic. What's in the glass? This is apple spice infused vodka. And it is delicious. Well, thank you for joining us, Ricardo Rubio. I'm glad you read the book, even if you can't stay for the chat. You can watch the video afterwards. With the right mic in. Okay, I'm going to zhuzh things around here a little bit. Move my keyboard. Bring the mic right up close in front, and I will just try not to get too enthusiastic. When my voice gets higher, it gets staticky. I'm so sorry. This is the same microphone I always use. I don't know what the problem is. All right, so anyway. The Beautiful is a historical vampire young adult romance murder mystery set in 1872 New Orleans. And the author says the reason she wanted to write a vampire book, especially set in New Orleans, is because she's a big Anne Rice fan. And I, too, am a big Anne Rice fan. So that greatly appealed to me. And I thought, if this author likes the same things I like, I am surely going to like her book too, right? So as far as the Anne Riciness of it goes, and that you have much more glamorous style vampires in New Orleans in a historical setting, yes, that is all there. And her vampires also sort of follow the same rules as Anne Rice's vampires. They cry blood tears. They do have their own traits. Anne Rice's vampires don't transform, but these ones do. So when they go into like vampire mode, their eyes turn black and their teeth get long and they sort of go kind of feral. So it is different in some ways. It's not just an Anne Rice ripoff. Not that there's anything wrong with that. She is queen for a reason. And, you know, people rip off Dracula all the time. So it's better. The mystery is kind of a Jack the Ripper murder mystery sort of thing. And the protagonist is a teenage girl. And this was a YA book. But the thing about historical books is when you have teenagers who are like of a marriageable age, they don't really act like teenagers. So the people in this book were acting like adults. And the reason it counts as YA is because that's how the publisher wanted to market it. Books are sold as YA more for who they're written for than who they're written about. So would a teenager relate to the problems in this book that the protagonist is having? Would they speak to them? Would they have like morals and messages that teenagers would take to heart? And then, of course, any adult like myself who likes those kind of stories can also appreciate it. But she is basically an adult. She's like a grown woman who has a job, who lives on her own. She's not like going to high school or anything. She's a dressmaker's assistant. And the love interest is a grown man who has a job, who's like in society and he's looking to get married. It's very, someone compared it to Jane Austen in the sort of like marriageable age people trying to get married and, you know, trading witty repartee and hate at first sight. And then they wind up loving each other after they find out that each other are actually good people beneath their flaws. Or actually, in this book's case, when they find out each other are bad people beneath their flaws, and they're like, hey, we both have dark pasts, so we can be in love. Yeah, she's 17, he's 18, but they act mature for their age because in 1872, people did act mature for their age. They were grown up by the ages 17 and 18. So with historical stuff, it's very different. I think a teenager could still enjoy this, especially if it's a more mature teenager who likes historical fiction. But the other main difference between this and anything you'd think of with Anne Rice is that it's not told from the vampire's points of view. It is told from this human girl's point of view who gets mixed up in this vampire world. And you actually don't get any vampires in this book that you, the reader, know of until almost at the end. Like, she knows these people are weird and something's going on with them, but she doesn't know they're vampires, and the reader doesn't know they're vampires unless you like read about the book ahead of time. She thinks they're not human, and we get several chapters from the anonymous murderer's point of view. You don't know anything about the murderer other than they are a creature, non-human creature. So you could be reading this book if you knew nothing about it and trying to guess what kind of non-human creature there are. There's a lot of creatures in this world that exist that we're told about, but we don't get to see, like fae creatures and folklore creatures and all those kind of things. But the only ones we actually really see that we know of are the vampires, but we don't find out they're vampires until the very end. So the main vampire in this, no, I don't think there's any aliens in here, but the main vampire in this is the Count Saint Germain. And the Count Saint Germain was an actual historical person. And someone who's also was named Saint Germain, Jacques Saint Germain, came to New Orleans back in oldie times and told everyone, hey, I'm related to the famous Count Saint Germain, who was like buddies with King Louis, the King Louis who got beheaded, I think. And I'm descended from him. And everyone's like, are you sure you're not actually him and an immortal vampire? Because you look exactly alike. You never eat. You have weird habits. We think you actually are him. And he liked this rumor so much, this actual historical person in New Orleans, that he encouraged it. And you can read about that legend. It's one of New Orleans' most famous vampire legends. New Orleans has 4 famous vampire legends, and they are all written in this book, which I got recently, called New Orleans Vampires History and Legend by Marita Wayward Crandall. And she is a vampire scholar who lives in New Orleans and wrote about the legends. So I was reading up about the Count Saint Germain and like his history in this book, and that was good information. Oh, thank you, Lindsay P, for the $4.99. I love super chats. And the character in this book that's the love interest is the nephew of the vampire Saint Germain, and his name is Sebastian Saint Germain, or otherwise known as Bastien, because he's a romantic hero. Of course, his name is Bastien. So yeah, there's a lot of vampire stories that use Saint Germain in it. I'm sure this isn't the first one you've ever heard of. So the Count Saint Germain in this, his name is Nicodemus. The actual Count Saint Germain, according to this book, didn't have a first name that we know of. So I think they just named him Nicodemus in this book because it's a cool name. And also to make him sound even more ancient, because that's like some sort of, classical name. So it doesn't set him in time period. But the nephew, Sebastian Saint Germain, is the hate at first sight love interest. So the story goes that Celine killed a guy. Oh, her name is Marceline Rousseau. She killed a guy and had to flee Paris. And she was a fancy dressmaker's apprentice in Paris. So she fled to New Orleans along with a bunch of other girls that were trying to start new lives in New Orleans. It was very reminiscent of the Casquette Girls, even though that isn't alluded to in this book. The Casquette Girls is another vampire legend that you can read about in this book, or in the other YA vampire series, The Casquette Girls by Alice Arden, which is really cool, and I do recommend. No, his nickname wasn't Nick. Nicodemus's nickname was Nico. So Celine flees to New Orleans. She makes some friends on the ship. She's got her gal pals, but she's got this dark secret because she killed a guy because he tried to rape her, and she fought back. She hit him on the head and he died. But now she thinks that she doesn't deserve happiness or to live because she's, done an evil deed, and she thinks very poorly of herself. She also sort of has self-esteem issues because her mother was from East Asia, but she died when she was very young, and Celine is white passing, and her white father always told her to repress her heritage and never let anyone know her true self, that she's actually half Asian. Otherwise, her whole life would suck, and to always pretend to be just white French. So she's got some baggage. We don't know where her mother is from. It's never said. We know she has wavy hair and green eyes. So I was thinking Middle Eastern, but I've seen a lot online that say that the mother was Korean the same way that the author is half Korean. So I don't know if that's word of God or if people are just assuming. But the Celine is white passing, half Asian. And Bastien has a black grandmother, I think, or maybe great grandmother. And the other love interest, because of course there's a love triangle, is he has a black grandmother too. So everyone is, mixed race. And in New Orleans, and a lot of the side characters are all different ethnicities. Bastien's best friend is Indian, and some of his cohorts are black from other countries, not American black, and Asian and other things. And he has a token lesbian friend. And yeah, so there's a very diverse book, but New Orleans is historically very diverse. So accurate. Thank you. And Celine comes to New Orleans, wants to start a new life, but because she's like sassy and mouthy, she can't really make her way ingratiate herself. So she gets stuck selling handkerchiefs that she sewed because, she's a dressmaker. She can sew things out in the heat of summer, the heat of winter, because it's very hot in New Orleans in the winter. And this vampire lady happens to walk by and says, I want to buy all your handkerchiefs. And also you should make me a dress because you clearly have sewing talent. So come make me a dress. And Celine, who's living with her gal pals at a convent where the girls would go and they'd stay at this convent, not to become nuns, but to be married off. And in the meantime, they would do work and make money for the convent. It was just a charitable thing convents did. She's like, well, I want to go make this dress for this vampire lady who she doesn't know she's a vampire, but she's like, obviously a vampire. But a very nice one, a friendly vampire. And her name is Odette. And the Mother Superior is like, no, you're not going to go. Some girl just got slaughtered brutally as if by a wild animal on the docks last week. So no, you can't go out at night to go do this lady's dress. And why does she want you to come at night anyway? That's creepy. And so Celine's gal pal says, well, I'll go with her and I'll watch her. And then the Mother Superior is like, okay, you can go. And it turns out she was okay with it because she sent yet another one of the girls to go spy on them. So while Celine and her friend Pippa are there in this creepy vampire club, it's like a club of debauchery where all the vampires gather to be like their safe space, because all the vampires are people of color or gay or something where they get ostracized. So they come to the safe space where they can be inclusive. And they're also magic users. So they go there to practice their magic. And it's kind of like a club for practicing the dark arts. And it's above a very fabulous restaurant. So you get a lot of food porn. So while they're there, the girl that was sent to spy on them, she gets murdered by the same killer, or so we think. And then the cops show up and Celine gets questioned. And for some reason, she gets really angry about it. And she's scared of her dark secret coming out. And so the main detective, Michael, who's the other love interest, because of course he is, she tries to flirt with him. And then he embarrasses her for embarrassing herself. So she hates him too. And then meanwhile, Bastian was there and they were trading barbs and hating each other, but there's chemistry or something. I don't know. I don't know why they like each other, but they're all also very hot. Celine's main problem in life is that she's got these huge boobs and people are always gross to her, which is why she almost got raped that one time. And so people are like, oh, I wish I looked like you. And she says, no, you don't. It's a curse. And, but Bastian isn't into her for her boobs, and neither is Michael. They're both into her for her witty repartee because she's so smart and she quotes Shakespeare all the time, but then they make fun of her for quoting Shakespeare all the time. So, but they both talk about how she's the only woman who's ever been intellectually able to keep up with them. So the Mother Superior shows up because Odette went to get her, and she gets Celine and her gal pal out of there, and so they go home. But then the next day, she has to get questioned by the cops anyway, but, she gets her escape. So Celine decides that she wants to find out what's going on with Bastian and the other guys in this den of iniquity, which is called the Court of Lions. And it has this symbol, which is a fleur-de-lis in the mouth of a lion. So I was picturing this big fleur-de-lis and then a lion's mouth around it. I don't know. But there's actually a picture of it on the book. Oh, do you see inside the book, there's a map of New Orleans. Isn't that cool? So you could follow all the paths that they go to. Can you see this? And it's like an etching. Let's see if I can get it to catch the light. The fleur-de-lis in the mouth of the lion. So there's the fleur-de-lis. And then this whole thing is a lion. I don't know why they didn't say a lion with a fleur-de-lis in its mouth. Oh, there we go. Focus. There we go. Focus. My camera is confused. Yes, I too quoted a lot of Shakespeare when I was 17 years old and a pretentious nerd. But as an adult reading this, I'm just get over yourself. So Celine really wants to figure out what's going on. She also really wants to make this dress for Odette. She kind of hates Sebastian, and she hates that she hates him. And meanwhile, Michael's like giving her problems. So the next day, Michael shows up at the convent to do the interview with her since she got out of it the night before. And Sebastian's friend Arjun, who's like got lawyer skills but can't be a lawyer because Indian people aren't allowed to be lawyers, shows up to lawyer for her. And he's like, Sebastian sent me to be your counsel. And she's like, that's really nice of him. And then she realizes that Arjun's just there to spy for Bastian. She's like, that's really sucky of him. So now she's mad at Bastian. So she flirts with Michael to try to make Bastian feel shitty and like she's fraternizing with the enemy. But then it just makes them all like her more. So the mystery unfolds, things ensue. She's making this dress for Odette. She goes to have dinner with Odette, and Odette's trying to get her to admit that she likes Bastian, and she gets her to admit it just as Bastian like walks in the door, and she's like so mortified, and all of Bastian's friends are there, and they're all making fun of her, and she's like, I'm leaving. I'm going to walk home alone in the night, in the dark, very recklessly right now. So she leaves the restaurant, and she's like, this was a really stupid idea. I'm going to get myself killed. And she starts getting stalked by something very obviously not human. It's like moving with the shadows, and it's kind of flying, and it's scuttling around, and she's like, what is this horrible thing stalking me? But then Bastian shows up and rescues her. But the thing is sort of like whispering stuff at her very threateningly, and also quoting Shakespeare. There was a lot of speaking French in this book, which I had sort of like a passing smattering of French, so I understood most of it, but I was surprised that it had untranslated French in it that you had to figure out from context, because usually you won't see that in YA books, at least. So he's saying things in French, and you could like go to Google Translate and figure it out if you want to guess. Bastian rescues her, and she's like, I'm just all shaken up. I don't want to go back to the convent. So he takes her to the carnival, because it's Mardi Gras, and there's like parades and carnival around. So they're like going around the carnival, lots of New Orleans scenery, lots of local color, and sort of flirting and sort of like almost kissing and almost falling in love. And she keeps saying like, you shouldn't fall in love with me. And he keeps saying, well, you shouldn't fall in love with me. And she wants a proper young gentleman to sort of save her tarnished reputation. And he needs to marry well in society. And she's like a convent girl with no prospects. So it's like, politically, they're not good for each other, but they're clearly hot for each other. But they decide that they're just going to be friends. So she goes home, and then like a few days later, she's still making the dress for Odette, and she comes back to her room, and there's another dead body in there. Like the killer has been there. The killer's still there. And it's the dead body of the convent's gardener. And she's freaking out, and her friend runs off to like get help. And the killer is there, and Celine stabs him with a pair of scissors. And the killer has decided, at least from the killer's point of view chapters we get, that he wants Celine to get at Bastian. He's like, oh, Bastian has feelings for this girl, so therefore I'm going to take what he loves by targeting this girl. So Celine sees the gardener dead, and she realizes that people around her are dying, and she takes this very personally. So she has this sort of like sobbing breakdown moment in the rain, where she says, everyone around me is dying. I'm bad news for everyone. I'm just going to walk out in the rain and leave and go be alone forever. It's very melodramatic. And her friends are all like, don't do that. We still love you. And she's like, no, I'm bad for you. Leave me alone. I should just leave. So the Mother Superior Sora's like, you shouldn't stay at the convent because I don't want anyone else to die. And Celine's like, I'll go, leave in the rain. So the cop shows up, and he's like, why are you just trying to run away in the rain? And Odette shows up before the cop can like bug her too much. He says, I will take you to a very fancy hotel and put you up in this very fancy hotel, and you'll be safe there. And then Celine says, I have an idea. You guys are going to use me as bait to catch this killer, because he's clearly after me now, based on the things he said. And they're all like, no, we will not do that. This is a bad plan. And she's very unhappy about that. Michael is definitely not on board. Oh, yeah. There was a moment where Odette admitted to Celine that she was a lesbian, and Celine was like, "Oh, I'm very flattered by that." No, and Odette's like, "I'm not into you." It's very cliche. Um, so Celine goes to this fancy hotel. We get another point of view chapter from the killer. And they're like, I could get into that hotel and get her if I wanted to, even though it's warded by all these magic wards. Because that's a thing, apparently. Vampires can use magic. So the hotel room is the hotel room of the Comte Saint Germain, who hasn't been around the entire book, but we keep hearing about him. We have also heard that Sebastian, his mother and father died when he was young, and then his older sister died when he was young, and he blames himself for their deaths. We find out later that the reason they died is because the vampire count's enemies are killing off his mortal descendants, because that's what your enemies do. So, Celine's safe in this hotel, and she sends Bastien a note, and she's like, I know we agreed just to be friends and we weren't going to be romantic, but I have this plan. I want to use myself as bait. Come help me. And he writes back and he says, no. She's like, bitch. So there's going to be a party because it's, Mardi Gras, it's festival time, carnival. So she throws together a last minute costume. And this is very unfortunate because the costume is very tight. She had to borrow it. And it squeezes her boobs up really high. And she can't breathe in it. She's like very big boob troubles this whole night. So she and Odette go to this party. It's a garden party. And it's supposed to be Midsummer's Night's Dream themed. And Celine gets there and spends the entire time being pissed off that nobody else at the party has clearly even read or seen Midsummer Night's Dream because they're all dressed up like Greek myths, which, it's a Greek myth-based play, but, not the Shakespeare version. So she's there in her very tight dress, being very uncomfortable. She's like, I'm going to come to this party and find Bastien and force him to help me, force him to answer me, force him to say more than just no. But meanwhile, while she's there, she sees her gal pal from the convent who she's been avoiding, and she has to keep avoiding her because she can't just explain anything to her because she's afraid if the killer sees her with her friend Pippa that the killer will then target Pippa because he targeted her other friends. So, it's kind of irrational, but I get where it's coming from. No, the boobs are not important. It's just color. So she and Sebastian exchange some witty barbs and have some tense moments, and then she goes running off into the hedge maze. I always say hedge mage, which might be a kind of mage, I don't know, but hedge maze to get away before Pippa can see her, and also to make Bastien follow her, which he does, and he's dressed as a minotaur, and she's like, there's no minotaurs in Midsummer Night's Dream, damn it, this isn't just Greek myth free-for-all. He's very upset about this. And they get into the hedge maze, and they have a very sexy moment because someone's coming and they have to pretend to be lovers so that they don't think that, and she says, tell me the truth of what's going on. I know you and your friends aren't human. He's like, I'm totally human. I don't know what you're talking about. Because it turns out he is human. He's the mortal descendant of a vampire. All of his friends are vampires because they're there to protect him. And he happens to be the only human. Yes, the hedge mage. The mages that live in the hedges. So he says he's not going to tell her anything. And then he's like, never mind, I will, because they have a sexy moment. And they just can't deny their chemistry. They're so sexy. He's like, but not here, because hedge mazes have ears. So he's like, let's go someplace private. So they go back to the hotel room. And he's like, I'm going to be really mean to her and get her to stop asking questions and just get rid of her. And it's going to break my heart, but it's going to be best for her because I don't want her coming into my world full of vampires because clearly that's not healthy. So I'm going to be mean to her. And they get up to the hotel. No, the stake was not hidden in her cleavage. The stake, which is a knife, in this case, it's a silver knife, is hidden in a pocket in her skirt, which she gets the silver knife in this scene. He gives her the silver knife when he's like, someone's coming. But, it's just some drunk girls talking about how hot he was in his hearing, as they do. So, when she had stabbed the killer with her scissors earlier, they were like, oh, if the scissors had been silver, it would have actually done something. But they were just scissors. So they go back to the hotel room, and he decides he's going to be really mean to her. But she is so witty and so intellectually on his level that she just gets past all his defenses, gets beyond it, and they've also already admitted to each other that they're both mixed race and, biracial people, and that's caused them problems in society. And he's like, "I'm a killer. I've killed people. You don't want to be around me." And she's like, "Yeah, well, I'm a killer too. I killed that guy who tried to rape me." And then they start making out. And then he like picks her up and sweeps her into the room and takes her over to the bed. And they're on the bed and she's like, "Yes, I do want to have sex. I'm totally okay with this." And the way it's written, it makes it really seem like she's experienced at this, but apparently she's a virgin. And he has a thought, is like, this could ruin her reputation, but it won't do anything to me because society is unfair. And, double standard for men and women. And there's a lot of moments like that. There's a moment where Arjun, the Indian law guy who can't be a lawyer because he's Indian, is talking to the white best friend of Celine. And he says something about, she's English, so he says something about English imperialists and colonialization of India. And she's like, "Well, I would never supported that." And he's like, "Yes, but you are part of a society that benefits from the privilege of it. So you have benefited from my people's colonization, even if you don't support it." And she's like, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." There's a lot of very like social justice moments like that in this book, and are a bit heavy-handed, but it is a YA book, and in YA books, you do have to be heavy-handed because a lot of times for teenagers, it's the first time they're hearing ideas like this, so I get it. And he's like, "I could never be a lawyer because I'm Indian," and a lot of moments like that. With Odette, she wants to wear pants, but she can't because women aren't allowed to wear pants. So they're in the bed. And Sebastian's like, "Oh, this is my uncle's bed. It's going to be really weird that I'm going to have sex in it, but haha, he deserves it." And then they're just about to like get it on when she looks up and for the first time notices there's a dead body across the room hanging on the bookshelf. And it's the dead body of one of Bastian's friends, who we don't know yet is a vampire, but is a vampire. He has like this motley crew of friends, and they all have a different magical power, but they're all vampires. There had been a scene earlier in the book, which is totally unimportant to the entire book, which is why I skipped it because I completely forgot about it till now, but where Bastian is with some human guys and he's trying to talk into a business deal, and they're assholes. And one of them says, "Hey, Bastian, if you want to do this business deal with my dad, you're going to have to stop hanging out with all those black people and, the weirdos and the Asians." And Bastian's like, "Say that again." So he trusses him up and he brings all his vampire friends and they completely torture these white guys who are assholes. And then the business deal is never mentioned again. It's not part of the plot at all. The scene only exists to establish that Bastian's friends can sort of appear out of thin air because they're vampires, and that Bastian would torture people who are, racists. Anyway, back to the scene where they find the dead body. It's one of those vampire friends of Bastian's, one of his crew. So the cops come. Celine gets taken to not jail, but like the cop building where she's locked up to keep her safe. And Bastian sends her a note and he's like, "Meet me at midnight." Celine has to figure out how to sneak out of the police station to meet him at midnight. But before she does that, Michael, who is the detective, who is also mixed race, who has the hots for her because she's the smartest woman he's ever met, but he won't admit it because she kind of rejected him. He comes in with his grandma, his nonna, because he's Italian. He's Michael Grimaldi. And she brings Celine some soup. And she's like, "I'm sure Michael hasn't fed you because he never remembers to eat himself. So I brought you some soup." And it's this like Italian dish. And she brings her other grandson, who is Michael's cousin. His name is Luca. And he's like this giant man. He's like a giant. And he's paler than Michael. So I guess he's full Italian and not part black. But this character, Luca, he's very cool. He's introduced. He's like a very nice guy. And Michael's sitting there being grumpy the whole time. And the grandma and the cousin Luca spend the whole time hinting that Michael likes Celine and being like, "Oh, Celine, Michael likes someone, but he won't tell us who it is, but he doesn't know how to woo her. How would you recommend he woo her?" And it's very awkward. when I talk a lot, I get like congested, so I have to blow my nose. I will be right back. I'll take a tissue and I'll blow my nose where you can't hear me. You heard me blow my nose. I'm sorry. I was like 3 rooms away. I don't know how you heard me. Maybe you just heard my fan. Where was I? So yes, there's a scene with the grandma, and they eat some soup and they flirt, and Celine's like, oh, there's no way you heard me blow my nose. The door was closed and I was like across the house. You heard my fan. And the soup. See, you keep making me forget. It's kind of a pointless scene, I guess, to establish that Michael really does like Celine, though I don't get why he likes her, unless she's just like really the only woman he's ever met who's smart. You guys suck. So she goes out to meet Bastian. She sneaks out of the police station, and she gets to. She doesn't get to where she's supposed to meet him, but anyway, she takes off her shoes, so she's like running in her socks through the streets, and she gets out there, and this guy shows up, and she's like, oh, I recognize this guy from the portrait. He looks kind of like Bastian. It's the real Count Saint Germain. But wait, he looks exactly like he did in the portrait when he was only 25. He hasn't aged a day. What's up with that? And he's clearly a immortal vampire who doesn't age. And he basically says, I could kill you if I wanted to, but I won't. But I want you to stop being in love with Bastian. I want you to reject him. And she's like, psh. And then so he makes all the other vampires from the Court de Lion, the Lion Court, show up. And it's Odette's one of them, and then all the others. But Arjun isn't there. So I think Arjun might not be a vampire. We don't actually find out in this book if Arjun is a vampire or not. He's the lawyer guy. And Celine's like, et tu, Odette? And she's like, the Count Saint Germain is my master. Nico is my master vampire, and I can't do anything. And so Nico's like, yes, we could just like totally slaughter you right now, but we won't. I want you to reject Bastian. And if you do, I'll give you a favor. That's what I do. You do something for me, I'll do something for you. We could be friends. And she's like, I'll think about it. And he's like, by the way, Bastian's not coming. And she's like, yeah, I figured that out. So she doesn't know how and when she's going to see Bastian again. She still wants to do her plan of using herself as bait to catch the killer. So the next thing that comes up is the big masquerade ball, which is a Louis and Marie Antoinette themed thing. And everyone's supposed to wear all white. And she's been making this white dress for Odette, who's going to go as, not as Marie Antoinette, but as Louis's lover. Haha, scandalous. And she finishes the dress and she goes to deliver to Odette, but they don't even let her up to see Odette. They just take it at the door. And the guy who's like the guard and also the elevator guard is apparently Fae. He's like a dark elf or something. Yeah. So we find out that Bastian's going to be at this masquerade ball. So Celine says, well, now I have to go to the masquerade ball because it's the only way I'll get to see him. So she makes herself a dress too, and she does this in like half a day. But the rule of the ball is you have to wear all white, and you have to be in that, pre-revolutionary France style. So she makes herself a black dress so she could just be like different than everyone else. and be the only person at this entire ball wearing black. And, she has black hair. And she just shows up in this black dress, and everyone's like, but no one says anything. And she's like, isn't that interesting with society? They make all these rules, but they never know what they would do if someone actually broke their rules. And I'm breaking their rules. So she gets there, and she sees Bastian, and she's like, he's so hot. But then the Count, Saint Germain, Nico, is like, let me dance with you. And he's like, so have you thought about my offer? Are you going to reject him? And she realizes that her plan of what she thought she was going to do for her plan wouldn't work. First, she's like, I want to leave New Orleans. I kind of want to forget all this dark, scary stuff. And he's like, oh, I have vampire mind powers. I actually can make you forget. Do you want me to do that? And she's like, never mind. I don't want to leave New Orleans. I don't want to forget. What I want is to be an independent woman with a dress shop. You get me set up as that, and I'll break up with Bastian. And excuse me. Drink some water. There is a bouncer at the door, but she knew the password, so they let her in, because I guess Odette told her. So she says, on one condition, you have to let me break up with Bastian alone. I don't want you there or any of your flunkies there. I just want to talk to him by myself. And he's like, you drive a hard bargain, but I guess. So she says, I'm going out on the balcony. You send Bastian out there and I'll dump him out there. So she goes out on the balcony. She's out there, and there's like a bunch of people out there too, sort of gossiping, and she's listening to them. And of course they're talking about Bastian, and they think like Bastian and Odette are lovers. And she's like, she's gay. They're so wrong. Bastian loves me. And then suddenly everyone on the balcony just like turns into a zombie, like total sleepwalker, and just walks inside and locks the door. And she's like, that was weird. Did the Count Saint Germain do that? Is that a vampire power? She doesn't know he's a vampire. She's like, is that a power of what these weird people have? And this power has not been established as a thing vampires have at all. And we as the audience don't even know they're vampires yet. We just know he hasn't aged today. And then the killer shows up and bites her neck, drinks her blood, abducts her. Then we go to Bastian's point of view, and Bastian's like, where did she go? I don't know. I have to go find her. But he's not allowed to, because he's like being babysat. So he talks Odette into defying the uncle, even though the whole point was that Odette couldn't defy him, and that's why she had to betray Celine. But now she defies him. This time she does it. So he goes off after to try to find out who took Celine and why. And he goes back to the police station to look at Michael's clues. And he comes in ready to tell Michael, like, Celine's been kidnapped and I need your help. But Michael's not there. And he's like, whew, hate that guy. Because he and Michael have a rivalry over a woman from their youth. And we don't know who the woman is or why this rivalry is, but they hate each other. We also know that they're from warring families that don't like each other. You find out in the end that Michael's family, the Grimaldis, are a different supernatural creature that have an animosity with the vampire families. It's a rivalry. So, he's looking at all of Michael's clues. He breaks into the office. He figures out where the lair is of the killer, and he's about to go get it. And then Michael shows up, and he's like, what the hell are you doing here? And they fight, and he punches Michael in the face and breaks his nose. And he's like, I've broken the treaty. I have laid a hand against the Grimaldi family. A Saint Germain has injured a Grimaldi, and now the truce is broken. I've undone years of truce. And then he goes off. And we don't know what that means yet. So he goes off to the cathedral, St. Louis Cathedral. And there, Celine is been tied up by the killer. And it turns out the killer is the friend who was the third body to die, or the fourth body if you count the first person on the docks. The one that they saw his decapitated head. And she's like, I saw your decapitated head. How are you the killer? And he's like, I saw what you wanted me to see. And she's like, what does that mean? It's never explained. We don't know how he made her and Sebastian see his decapitated head, and the police, apparently. But no, he was the killer all along. His name is Nigel. So Nigel is pissed because he didn't like being turned into a vampire to be a glorified babysitter for the Count's human descendant. Because the Count's like, Bastian is my last human descendant. If he dies like his mom and his sister did, I will never have any other human descendants, and my like bloodline is gone. And so he really wants Bastian to marry well and have babies, which is why he doesn't want him to marry Celine, because that's not a good marriage, which is why it mattered so much to him. So Nigel's like, I'm targeting you because I'm after Bastian, because he's what really matters, but also I like to play and have fun. So Celine is like already figured out halfway to get out of her bonds. And as she's sort of fighting with him, she has the silver knife in her pocket. All she has to do is reach it, but her hands are tied and he's holding her. Sebastian shows up with a gun. And it's a standoff. And Bastian's like, I'll shoot you. And he's like, before the bullet hit me, I would rip out her throat. He's like, put the gun down and I'll let her go. And you're all I really want. And she's like trying to get Bastian to do it. So finally, Bastian puts the gun down. Nigel jumps on Bastian, tears out his throat. Celine jumps on Nigel, stabs him with the silver knife. He's like exploding, but not really. And then the other vampires show up, Odette and all the others. And one of them kind of kills Nigel off screen. At least it's implied that, because they see him later and he's like, oh, he had blood on his hands from when he finished Nigel. I was like, wait, he finished Nigel? It made it seem like Nigel got away. Anyway. But Bastian's lying there on the floor. His throat's ripped out. He's bleeding to death. And the Count Saint Germain shows up. And Celine's like, I've figured out that you're vampires. You could turn him into a vampire and save him. And the Count's like, no. The whole point was to save my human legacy so he could have babies. That's all I cared about. Turning him into a vampire is not going to do anything. And she's like, but I love him. Does that mean nothing? He's like, yeah, it does mean nothing. It really does mean nothing. And, if he turned into a vampire, he would keep loving you. And what good would that do me? He'd probably love you even more, because vampires feel more strongly. So yeah, no, not going to turn him into a vampire. And she's like, what if I let you do your mind trick on me and make me forget all about him? Then would you save his life? Because I care more about that than being with him. And he's like, no. She's like, please. And he's like, fine. So he does. And the book ends with her waking up with amnesia, with Michael being like, something's missing, but Michael's here and he's nice and I like Michael. And it's very hinting that her and Michael are going to get together now, because she's forgotten Bastian, even though she feels something's missing in her soul. And then we get more points of view from the killer's point of view, but not Nigel. The killer has not been Nigel all along. Nigel was just working for the killer. The real killer was Bastian's sister, who we were told died so long ago. And she's bitter because when she was dying, the Count wouldn't turn her into a vampire either. He's like, nah, useless to me. You can just die. But someone did come along and turn her, but not into a vampire. A werewolf came along and turned her into a werewolf. And it was Luca, the cousin of Michael, because the Grimaldi family is a werewolf family. And you've been hearing about the Fellowship and the Brotherhood and the Fallen and like all these different like factions, the courts, the Fallen, and the Brotherhood. And it's very confusing. I'm a very careful reader. And I was confused. I was super confused by this ending. So what I gather, and please tell me if I'm wrong, if you read this better than I did, maybe I made mistakes, is that the Brotherhood are the werewolves, and the Grimaldi family is a werewolf family. So I don't know if Michael's a werewolf or not, or if just his cousin is. And the Fallen are the vampires. Yeah, vampires, werewolves, fae, the supernatural kitchen sink. So the Fallen are the vampires, and the court is just a faction of the Fallen. And the Fallen and the Brotherhood have a rivalry, and Bastian ruined the truce by punching Michael, even though Bastian wasn't a vampire, but he's of the Saint Germain family. So he ruined the truce. So now the truce is broken. So his sister, who wanted to be saved and become a vampire, is bitter because the vampires wouldn't save her, but the werewolves did. So even though she's a Saint Germain, she's on the werewolf side, and Lucas saved her. And also she's kind of bisexual because her girlfriend werewolf in the past got killed, and that's her tragic backstory. So she thinks Bastian died. I get the feeling that this count did turn Bash into a vampire. We don't see it, but that was the implication. And she's like, yes, my work here is done. He wouldn't save me. So she's like, I was just a lowly woman. He only cared about Bash and he just let me die. So that's why I'm against him. And she got Nigel to work for her. There's a scene from the killer's point of view, and I don't know whether it's Nigel or her, earlier in the book where someone is doing her bidding and she's like, this like a Renfield character who's just so obsessed and so desperate to like, and I think it was supposed to be Nigel, but they made him seem so pathetic. It was a totally different character. And also Nigel's accent keeps changing. So you like when he's talking, he's Cockney at first, but apparently that was an act and talks with an upper crust English accent sometimes. So when it's written in dialogue and the character is not named, you don't know who it is. Celine wakes up with amnesia, seems to be getting it on with Michael. Michael's very much like, I'm here for you. The end. There's a sequel. And the sequel, according to the Amazon summary, is Bastian and Celine are figuring things out. Meanwhile, problems with the vampire society, and Bastian's getting used to being a vampire. And will their love save the day? I don't know how you could read that as a standalone novel, even if it is all Bastian's point of view instead of Celine's, without having read this. But when the author said that each of the books in the series was based on a different character, I thought maybe book 2 would be like one of the random court characters' life story and Celine was done, but no, she's totally in book 2. So that's the book. The ending felt very full of holes, like very kind of sloppy. I had a lot of unanswered questions, which I know when you're setting up for a sequel, you do want to leave unanswered questions, but there felt like a lot of things got dropped. Arjun wasn't in the last third of the book at all. Why? Nobody noticed he was missing, so it wasn't like, ooh, what's this mystery we have to solve? He just disappeared from the book. And a couple other characters disappeared from the book. And hey, you who read the audiobook, was the villain chapter point of views a female voice? Because it should have been, because it was the sister all along, we find out. Was it a female voice? The sister who was a werewolf ripping out people's throats. Please tell me. Yeah, the stuff with the grandma, the stuff with Bastian torturing the business proposition for the hotel, and then the hotel's never mentioned again. Apparently hotels are important. I don't want to complain too much about this book because it did have a lot of good with it. I was just very frustrated by the ending. I felt like it could have been better. Of the books we've read in this book club, I would put it in the good half, not the bad half, mostly because of the style and the setting and the color of it. I liked how diverse it was. One thing the author said in one of her interviews was when they were like, why write a vampire book? Vampires are so overdone. She said, well, because I wanted a vampire book that was diverse, that had queer characters and mixed race people and Black people, and it's New Orleans, and New Orleans is a mixed race city. So of course my characters are all going to be mixed race. And it wasn't just like one character, but it was like all the characters. So that was great. I wish there were more gay people instead of just like the one token, but you know, beggars can't be choosers. How many stakes would I give it? I haven't been ranking the books like stakes out of stakes. I don't know, like I have to keep reminding myself that it's a YA book and I should be gentler on it because it didn't often read like a YA book. For a historical book, these were adults having adult problems doing adult things, not children. But it was written for young readers. So things were less subtle than they would have been in an adult book, and you have to take that into consideration. Oh, the villain's point of view was a female actress and badly narrated, but Celine's voice was good. Does Celine have a French accent? Because she should have. I'm sorry the audiobook was disappointing. It's cool that they have multiple narrators, though, but I feel like having a female voice for the villains chapter really gives it away, because I felt like the villains chapters, which are all first-person point of view, and the rest of the book is third person, the villains chapters, at first, they want you to think it's Bastion. And then they want you to think it's Michael. And then they maybe want you to think it's the Count or someone else. But it's supposed to be a complete surprise that it turns out to be the sister. Especially because she's talking about a female love interest from her past, her tragic backstory. So the sister having a female love interest was supposed to make you assume it was a man and then throw you for a loop and be like, oh, my expectations, So hearing it on an audiobook with it having a female voice actress would probably have spoiled all of that, those layers that I feel like the author really wanted you to get out of those chapters. What else could you do? I don't know. Maybe that's true. Any thoughts or questions? All I've really done is summarize the books. I guess I've given some opinions. Knowing that this author lives local to me makes me uncomfortable saying many negative things about the book. Not that I had that many, but I feel like I want to be kinder to it. Have you ever read a book where you have a different feeling going into it, where you want to like it more because of something about the author that makes you feel more generous towards it? That happened to me with this one. I'm just like, she lives in my city. We're practically friends. Of course I love her book. I probably would read the sequel, The Damned, because it did end with so many open questions that I'm curious. I didn't feel very sucked into this book. I did love all the New Orleans stuff, all the food porn, all the clothes porn, all the scenery porn. It wasn't as porny in that sense, like a lot of stuff, not sexual, as Anne Rice books are. So if you want more of that, you could just read Anne Rice. But it did have a lot more women than Anne Rice books do. And Anne Rice books are very dude-centric. So this, a lot more women in this, female friendships, gals being pals. It wasn't the kind of YA book where the protagonist just has no female friends for some reason. So that was great. Love female friendships. And that's one thing that the author said in her interviews, was that she really wanted to focus on a book that had solid female friendships based on friendships that she has in real life. Yeah. You think Michael is endgame? Sort of like a bait and switch, like a Team Jacob, but she ends up with Jacob this time? Okay, I'm going to look at the chat and see what you guys have been saying, because I've been talking for 56 minutes. Oh, what are vampires a metaphor for in this novel? If anything at all, they are absolutely metaphors. It's all about power. So Celine starts the story. She sees Bastion crossing the street. She doesn't know who he is. It's her first night in New Orleans. She just sees this guy crossing the street. And everyone in the wake of this guy crossing the street just like backs off. And she's like, I want that kind of power. Whatever power that person has, I want it. And you think Bastion is a vampire for the sake that he can make people react this way. It turns out he's not, but he basically is. Celine spends the whole time saying, I wish I had power. I wish I could walk into a room and command that room and just had everyone notice me. And all the people who are in the court, which is Bastion's group of vampires, are all people who would normally in this society, in this historical setting, be powerless. People who are not white, people who are looked down on by society in some way, people who are gay, like that kind of thing. And by becoming vampires, they've gained power, and now they can be powerful, not just by having super strength or whatever, but these magical abilities and just gaining that aura of respect from people. Except when they don't, like when Bastion's friends, business associates are like, you shouldn't hang out with all those Asian people. And this Celine has this darkness inside of her that she's constantly like, I should want to be good. I should feel bad for killing that guy, but I don't. I kind of liked it. And this darkness in me, I keep trying to suppress it, just like I've always tried to suppress my mixed race heritage. But I should just embrace it and just be who I am and just like own it. And she goes to this high society party wearing the opposite color she's supposed to wear just to show that she doesn't care what society thinks. So here again, we have the vampires being free of the rules of society, not being constrained. That kind of freedom and that kind of freedom is powerful if you don't care what society thinks. So getting rid of that caring, because you could bunk rules, but if it's going to bother you, you're not powerful. So just not caring, that freedom and power, vampires. Leave the toxicity of Twilight out of this. No, the author is a fan of Twilight. I didn't see Twilight influence in this at all, but I know she is a fan, or at least she speaks politely about it. She says she did have fun with Twilight. Maybe she's just being polite. I don't know. Did the characters speak in modern parlance? No, they spoke historically accurately. They were speaking much less French than I think they would have been in that time period. In that time period in New Orleans, I feel like most of them would have been speaking French all the time. But also, Bastian lived in the Caribbean, I think. So he grew up speaking Spanish, but he could still also speak French. But they spoke Spanish sometimes. But they mostly spoke English the whole time. So anytime they did speak Spanish or French, it was written in Spanish or French. But in that time period, they should have been speaking mostly in that, and then it would have been translated to us like Anne Rice's books are. Let's see what else you guys are saying. Any other questions or thoughts or feelings about this book you want to discuss? Now's your chance. How many people are here? 101 people. Talk to me. If not, we will move on to the next. Will you do that? I'm going to drink my drink. Did they touch on the post-Civil War politics and the Reconstruction era of the setting? They did. The author said in an interview that she was specifically drawn to that period because after the Civil War, especially in a place like New Orleans, there was so much change going on politically and with diversity. One line that Michael, the police detective, mentions is that New Orleans is one of the only cities in the entire country that allows people of color or men of color to serve on the police department. So Michael, who has black blood in him, even though he's white passing and he has like white eyes, she keeps calling his eyes colorless. They're very light blue. But he's swarthy like an Italian. He's allowed to be a police detective, even though he's part black. And he talks about the one drop in the bucket rule about how, even if you're only a tiny bit black, they consider you black. But he's allowed to be a police because New Orleans is different than all the other places, but it's still hard. And the author talks about how she was specifically drawn to that period because of how things were changing. I feel like she could have done even more with it, but then you don't want the book to sort of be beating over your head with politics. It's already a mashup of horror, mystery, and romance. And it was marketed as a romance, and there was much less romance in it than I was expecting. It really read more like a mystery, and I feel like that was sort of more of a marketing decision. And when the author was asked, why would you mash up mystery and romance? As if no one's ever done that before. She said, because love and death are sort of two sides of the same coin. And I just wanted to play with that. And I feel like that's kind of true for all vampire fiction. Love and death, that dichotomy, that's like why we come to vampire books, right? It's the whole reason we're here. I love a good monster kitchen sink, but question, did they have to be vampires? Could they have been replaced with humans and changed little to nothing about the book? Well, for most of the book, yes, they could have been human because it was set up as a very Jack the Ripper style murder. The only reason they need to be vampires was to be super strong, to be able to not be defeated, but because the people against them were vampires, so it's like they could have all been human. And like I said, the vampire itself wasn't really present in the story as the audience understood until the very end. And this villain character that we're getting point of view chapters from all along the way turns out wasn't a vampire all along, but was a werewolf. So the only vampires that were there for most of the story were in the background, pretending not to be vampires, acting human, so you don't actually get any like vampire action till the very end of the book. What do I think of historical novels? It's harder for me to connect with that genre. I love historical novels personally, but I am also a big Anne Rice fan. Victoria Stark, thank you for the $8.30 Canadian. If this book was to be adapted into a movie, who would you cast in the ensemble? What book are you reading for your IRL book club? And do I miss toast? Yes, I miss toast. There was no toast in this book. What was there? Soup? There was soup. What did she eat at the fancy restaurant? Like liver or something? She ate something fun. I don't know who I would cast in the ensemble. I am terrible at fan casting, but the author said she would cast Jennifer Lawrence as Odette, and I disagree with that decision personally. What do you think? What am I reading for my IRL book club? What is its name? I'm just going to double check the name. Yes, okay. I just wanted to make sure I had it right. So for my IRL book club, I'm reading Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh, which is a novella about fae, but it's gay. So it's like a mansion in the woods where this fae man lives, and then another man comes along and gets involved with him. I'm excited. I haven't started it yet, but I'm going to read that now. Okay. I mean, when I'm reading about Celine being white passing, but having this East Asian aspect to her beauty, and she says, you know, the shape of my eyes, the height of my cheekbones, things people don't know come from my Asian mom, but add to my beauty and make them find me alluring. She doesn't use the word exotic, but that's basically what it means. It made me think of Kirite Kanawa, who's way too old to be Celine, but like a young version of her is who I probably would have thought. Oh, thank you, JRL Studios, for the $4.99 As a Fairy, Love a Gay Fae book. Well, you should read it. Here, let me give you a link. I just closed the link. I'm going to pull it up again. I'd never heard of this. One of my fellow book club people recommended it to us. How was my writing retreat? My writing retreat was good. I am working on the next Company of Death book, and I got some good work done. I can't tell you about that. I have not tried VTM Night Road. Any other questions about The Beautiful? If not, we can move on. I will tell you what we're reading next, and we will talk about that. It's your chance. If you asked me a question earlier and I didn't answer, ask it again. This is your chance. JRL Studios, I saw that fan art you did of Louis and Lestat on my Discord server earlier, and it made my entire day because I am obsessed with them, which I'm sure you already know. I just finished a script for my next vampire review a couple days ago, which I'm filming tomorrow, and it's on Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles, which I don't know if you can see them on my bookshelf. See them up there? That top shelf of my bookshelf, that's all Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles. There's 15 of them. And I have them all. And I have read them all, and I ranked them by most favorite to least favorite, and I talk about why, and I wrote the script about why, and it came out to 11,300 words. So it's going to be a very long video to film and edit, but I'm doing that tomorrow. Vampire fangs are not hollow. They are not straws. You cannot suck up blood through your teeth. They are They're like vampire bats. They puncture the neck and then they lap up the blood. Okay, see, my Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles list is going backwards. I'm going from best to worst. So you're going to know what my number one is immediately, because that's not a surprise. All right, next time on the Vampire Book Club, I should publish the video script as an ebook, or at least like upload it as a transcript. All right, next time on the Vampire Book Club, what are we reading? We are reading The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Sorry, this cover is so shiny. I'm trying to, can you see it better? It's got some peaches on it with fang marks and blood, because in the Southern, I'm guessing Georgia, peaches are a thing. Vampires. Apparently, the author almost titled this How My Mom's Book Club Slayed Dracula. So, what is this about? This book, I've been seeing this book going around. It came out recently. And been seeing it around. People keep asking me about it. And then one of my Discord pals sent it to me. Thank you, Lindsay, for sending it to me. Oh, maybe they are oranges. Could be oranges, like Florida oranges. You know what? I can't tell if they're peaches or oranges. I've never read any of Grady Hendrix's books. Okay, ready? In every book we read, no one ever thought anything bad was happening until it was too late. Patricia Campbell's life has never felt smaller. Her husband is a workaholic. Her teenage kids have their own lives. Her senile mother-in-law needs constant care, and she's always a step behind on her endless to-do list. The only thing keeping her sane is her book club, a close-knit group of Charleston women united by their love of true crime. Oh, it's Charleston. Charleston, South Carolina is the most haunted city in America, which I think New Orleans would argue. But I went to Charleston, South Carolina last year on vacation just because it was so haunted and I had to go see the ghosts, and I did the ghost tour. But that this is set in Charleston is telling. Yes, thank you, Lindsay P. Thank you for sending me this book. So these book club women read true crime books. At these meetings, they're as likely to talk about the Manson family as they are about their own families, which is true about book clubs. Yeah, that's the thing. From my IRL book club, I know these things. One evening, after book club, Patricia is viciously attacked by an elderly neighbor, bringing the neighbor's handsome nephew, James Harris, into her life. James is well-traveled and well-read, and he makes Patricia feel things she hasn't felt in years. But when children on the other side of town go missing, their deaths written off by local police, Patricia has reason to believe James Harris is more of a Bundy than a Brad Pitt. Oh, Brad Pitt, like Interview with the Vampire Brad Pitt? I wonder if they were not making that connection. The real problem? James is a monster of a different kind, and Patricia has already invited him in. Little by little, James will insinuate himself into Patricia's life and try to take everything she took for granted, including the book club. But she won't surrender without a fight in this blood-soaked tale of neighborly kindness gone wrong. Dun, dun, dun. So, sounds amusing. People keep recommending it. I don't know anything about it quality-wise, but everyone seems to like it. So I'm hoping it'll be good. And it's nice. Nice. We're reading a male author, which we haven't done for a while. So there we go. I did not ask the book club to vote on this book. I chose it just because it's recent and topical. And, you know, I have all these books on my shelf we need to read, but I like reading things that are very recent so I can sort of keep up with the trends in literature and know where vampires are going. This book came out last year. This one came out this year. So we're being very recent now. Maybe next month I'll put up some books that are more sort of classics or older so we can have some variety on that take. Florida man. On my Discord, several people mentioned that they had already read this book. So if you have already read this book, you should just come to our book club or join my Discord in the book club discussion group and just tell us your thoughts, even though you're not reading it at the same time with us, because I want to hear your thoughts. And I will take anything you say in the Discord and discuss it here. You know, if it's more topics and thoughts that we can add to our talk here. Some books in the Discord people talk about a lot, and some people don't say anything about. And it's always interesting which books make. Sorry, my book fell over. Which books make a lot of conversation in the Discord and which ones don't. It's funny, my book fell over and it made my chat window disappear. But don't worry, I'm getting it back. Who writes better vampire books, men or women? There's no difference. I think the people who write the best vampire books are people who feel like they don't fit into society. So I feel like a lot of women feel that more often than men. So proportionally, maybe more women. But there's plenty of men who feel that way too, for many reasons. Yes, people are already talking about this book. We are having this stream a little bit late this month because of my writing retreat. And I did a lot of work. Usually we have our streams around the 13th. So you have until December 13th to read this book. And then after December 13th, we'll start a new one. And I'm sort of debating whether I want it to be Christmassy, though we did already read Vampire Christmas Carol this year. So maybe it won't be Christmassy. I don't have that many Vampire Christmas books anyway. And the ones I do have would probably be hard for you to find. So it'll probably just be something random. All right, this is your chance to ask me any other questions. Otherwise, we're going to wrap up. I've got this much drink left. A Wine Mom Vampire Christmas Story. That's all my things. I have not read The Adventure of the Sussex. Oh, I think I have read The Adventure of Sussex. I read the entire Sherlock Holmes canon years ago, and it blurred together, so I need to reread it. The vodka's great. This is a local North Carolina apple spice infused vodka. They also do a raspberry infused vodka, and it comes in a very beautiful bottle. We're doing this again around December 13th, depending on what day of the week it is. Let me look at my calendar. I don't like to do it on weekends because nobody comes to streams on weekends. December 13th is a Sunday, so we'll probably do Monday the 14th, unless issues, and it would be Tuesday the 15th at the latest. But wasn't it great this month that we had a Friday the 13th? The best day. Ramses of the Damned by Anne Rice. Is it any good? I loved that book. If you are an Agatha Christie fan or a fan of any sort of like murder mystery that's sort of romanticized in 1920s Egyptology kind of era, you would like it. It's good stuff. How many skulls do I have? You expect me to count? It's too many to count. How's Carolina doing with COVID? Terribly. I don't leave home, so, you know, doesn't affect me. when I met Anne Rice, which was at Undead Con 6 years ago, and I met her for 5 minutes because you would go to this church, which is one of her favorite churches in New Orleans. And you would stand in line, and this line was hundreds and hundreds of people long. And you would go up in the line, and they would take 4 of you at once, and they'd sit you at a table with Anne Rice, and then the 4 of you got the chance to talk with her for 5 minutes. So depended how aggressive you were, how outspoken you were. And I'm not a pushy person, but I'm a very excited person. So I did talk, but I didn't want to take time away from the other 3 people who were sitting with me. But I told her that Ramses of the Damned, the Mummy book, reminded me of Agatha Christie. And she was like, oh, no one's ever said that before. Thank you. And that was my moment with Anne Rice. You were born on a Friday the 13th? I am so jealous. Yeah. I have all of those Lestat comics. They are over there on that bookshelf. I've shown them to you multiple times in my videos. I don't know if you can see it, but on the, I guess the top shelf that's in the screen view on the to your left, those are all the new books I've gotten in the past couple months that I'm going to make a video about too, that people have sent me. So I'm going to film that tomorrow too. Tomorrow's going to be a very busy filming day. What was the best thing to visit in New Orleans? The restaurants? Just the food was so good. Are there any vampire characters who actually dance? All vampires dance. Vampires love to dance. That's such a vampire trope. I can't think of any vampires that don't dance. What shows am I watching right now? I just watched season 5 of Lucifer. I love Lucifer. But ever since COVID started, I haven't been able to watch anything new. I just don't have the mental energy to intake things unless they're already familiar. I tried starting What We Do in the Shadows, and I couldn't watch it. It's like this COVID mind block, which I'm sure many of you have also experienced. Is there any chance Juliet Landau is putting me in touch with other people connected to Buffy? I don't know about that. And I wouldn't want to use her in such a nepotistic way. She's been very sweet every time I've talked to her. I am actually talking with her this week because on Saturday, I will be hosting the live Q&A with her and a couple other actors of A Place Among the Undead, which she reached out to me and asked me if I would host this live Q&A over a streaming thing. And we've been discussing it all week, and you should all come to it because I'm very excited about it, that this film, these movie stars would reach out to me and ask me to host this thing. Let me give you the link. So this movie has done several screening events. And you can just go watch the movie online now if you want to. But if you want to come to this particular screening event and watch this movie through the screening event and then stay afterwards for the live Q&A with me and Juliet and the other actors from the movie, you should do that. It is hosted by WhedonCon. So the special event WhedonCon, Joss Whedon Convention. And it's like a charitable donation to the Sophie Lancaster Foundation, which is very touching. So go down to special events on the link I just shared and click purchase tickets here. And then you will be able to come and watch the movie and also stay and listen to me and Juliet have a conversation live. So I'm very excited. I watched Ed Wood before I knew who Juliet was, so I need to watch it again now that I'm familiar with her. From all the conversations I've had with her, she's the sweetest, most nicest person in the world. I was like, how is a human this good? Are you a literal angel? What a wonderful person. But please come this weekend, Saturday. It's in the middle of the day. It's not in the evening. It's in the afternoon. It's like 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So it'd be in the evening for people in the Europe, I guess. Oh, thank you. So those are the exciting things happening for me this week. I'm doing this thing with Juliet this weekend. I'm recording my epic 11,300 word Anne Rice video tomorrow, along with that video about all my books. I'll be very busy. And then I have to edit all that. And of course, we're going to do more coteries of New York. What do I think about the Mesopotamian empires? I have no opinion on them. I have not researched them at all. The Duke. I hated The Beautiful and wish the story was about Odette, the high fashion lesbian of New Orleans. That would have been an awesome book. The one thing that bugged me about Odette was she was just perfect all the time. Like she was just completely happy, selfless character that just showed up out of nowhere like this magical lesbian with endless financial means and just did absolutely everything Celine needed and wanted whenever Celine needed and wanted it. And there was never a moment where Odette was like, but I too have feelings and problems and issues, and what about me? And it just seemed too fairy godmothery to me, and I wanted her to be more of a real person with like a story of her own. Lesbians are very magic, but they also have a lot of feelings. Would I like to be a founding member of a vampire activism group? Raise awareness about vampires. Like, excuse me, sir, have you heard of our Lord and Savior Dracula? I don't know why I did that British. My drink is gone. This is your last chance. Ask me your questions now. We are at an hour and a half. This is when we usually wrap up. So the night is coming to a close. Good companions when you're shopping at Lowe's or Home Depot. You mean the lesbians? You should only shop at Lowe's because Home Depot contributed to the Trump campaign. And Lowe's does other like good charitable things. Like Lowe's is a pretty good company. I only shop at Lowe's now. Would I ever do a review of Salem's Lot? I would have to read and or watch it first. I have never consumed Salem's Lot, which is a big flaw on my part. I know. I actually haven't read any of Stephen King's books. I have watched the movie of Pet Sematary and the movie of The Shining, and I think the miniseries of The Shining. That is all the Stephen King I've consumed. When I was a teenager, I used to write a lot of fan fiction. I would write dark horror fan fiction of Phantom of the Opera because I hated the romance fan fiction. And I only want to write the dark horror stuff. And everyone in the comments of my fan fiction on fanfiction.net when I was a teenager used to compare my writing to Stephen King. And it made me really bitter because I was like, psh, I've never even read Stephen King. And these people think I'm just ripping him off. They think I'm influenced by him. Psh, I'm never going to read him. And I know that's totally irrational and childish. And I'm over it now, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. But I do own Salem's Lot. Someone sent it to me and it is sitting on my shelf. Oh, thank you, Victoria. I'm so glad you came. I do want to read Salem's Lot. I feel like it's one of those important books in vampire genre pop culture history that matters. And then the movie of it is also important because it's been influential. And the influential vampires are the ones I care about. Have I seen Dracula 1979? Is that the Frank Langella one? Or was that 1976? If it's the Frank Langella one, then yes, I have seen it. And so should you all. Dr. Sleep was sent to me recently by the same person who sent me that other book. And it's sitting right back there on my shelf. Well, I will mention to you in that video that I will film tomorrow. So I now own Dr. Sleep and could read it, even though I haven't read The Shining, but I've seen the movie and the miniseries. So basically, I know Dr. Sleep has vampire-like entities in it. No, Christopher Lee was 1950s. I mean, Christopher Lee did a bunch of sequels, so. Dracula 1979. Was that like one of the Christopher Lee sequels where it's set in the 70s and they're like very like psychedelic? I'm looking it up. No, that's the Frank Langella movie. Okay. I was right the first time. Yeah, Dracula 1972. That's the Christopher Lee one. But it's like Dracula goes to the future to 1972 or something. If you haven't watched the 1979 version of Dracula, you must. That it's based kind of more off the play version of Dracula than the book version of Dracula, but it was the first movie version of Dracula that made Dracula sexy. He comes through the window with his hair blowing in the wind and his shirt all open. He's like, I'm here to seduce you. And the heroine's actually like, I'm into it. And very influential for following Dracula interpretations. Very influential. I have not heard of vamp consumption in 3 acts. I would like it. I should look that up. I have seen Cats 2019. I took my then 5-year-old son to see it with me, and my husband did not go see it with me, and he will never see it. Cats broke him. Yeah, Cats was the last movie I ever saw in the theaters because of COVID. I've never even heard of Encyclopedia Gothica. I do not have a copy. I have a P.O. box. If you want to send me anything, send it to me at my P.O. box. I check it every Tuesday. I'm ready. But ironically, I think that means the last movie Paul ever saw in theaters was Frozen 2, which we took our children to see when it was in theaters. Well, there's lots of vampire works where they don't include a reference to Dracula. I mean, Interview with the Vampire references Dracula, so even Anne Rice falls into that trap. But I feel like a lot of vampires feel like they have to reference Dracula to prove that they're different than Dracula, because Dracula was not the first vampire. And most vampire interpretations that are any good want to distance themselves from Dracula and draw on earlier vampire lore, and therefore will mention Dracula to prove that Dracula is no big deal. Any requests for books for my P.O. box? I do have a whole vampire wish list of all the vampire books that people have recommended to me that I'm like, people say this is good. I'll add it to my wish list. I will link it to you just in case it's not something you're already aware of. And if there's anything that's not on this wish list that you think I should add, tell me, send me a link, and I will add it to my wish list. Because, you know, sometimes like my mom will be like, what do you want for Christmas? And I'll be like, check out my vampire wish list. And then she'll send me a Christmas present. Oh, I've seen The Worst Witch starring Tim Curry and Fairuza Balk. I have seen it. Lindsay did a review of it back in her Nostalgia Chick days that I participated in. I was there. I'm so glad you woke up at 2 a.m. for this, Ellen. You are awesome. Good night, JRL Studios. I was supposed to turn this off 4 minutes ago, but we're still here. That's okay. It's COVID. We're not going anywhere. Are there any vampire books that I will not read? No, there are not. I will read any vampire book. I don't like reading porn, but I will do it. Yeah, because I feel like even the really bad ones or the really offensive ones give me a lot to say that I can then talk about and explain why they're bad and offensive, and those are good conversations that we need to have. Are black holes just huge space vampires? Yes, you're 100% right. Black holes are the vampires of space. I've not heard of Carry On Comfort. Thank you. The most engaging and engrossing vampire or gothic novel that I've read and would recommend. The Historian for vampire novels. I wouldn't really call it gothic, but it's a vampire novel. That was really good. Love that book. The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. If you liked the Da Vinci Code style books or National Treasure, those kind of like mystery treasure hunty books. Am I making an Etsy? Yes, I am, because I just got a new phone. Do you want to see my new phone? With a fancy camera, so now I can take pictures of my creations and make an Etsy. The reason I hadn't made an Etsy before is because I could not take good pictures of the things I was taking. So, yeah. I have not seen Captain Kronos, but I have seen Kronos, the vampire movie, and I did a review on it, and it's a review that I'm actually pretty proud of. So if you haven't watched my video on Kronos, go to my channel and watch it. Any favorite vampire comics? No. Every single vampire comic I've read, I've been disappointed with, unless it was like just a comic adaptation of a novel, like the Interview with the Vampire comics. Those are okay, even though I don't like the art, so still disappointed. I'm not aware of the old school vampire sketches from the BBC's The Armstrong and Miller Show. I would like to see those. I'm going to have to Google that. You're asking me the hard questions. Am I a fan of Ariello Voltaire? All I know of Voltaire is the songs that were used in the vampire animatic. I gotta send you this if you don't know it. Daria Cohen's vampire animations. She uses Voltaire songs, and they are amazing. I'm gonna send you this playlist. There. Watch those animations. They use Voltaire songs. I've never heard any of his other songs other than these, though. I have not read Blind Sight, but it is one of the novels that someone has sent me, so it is on my shelf. All right, friends, unless you have any other pressing thoughts to share with me, I think we are reaching our end. Please come and join me on Saturday for the live screening event of A Place Among the Dead, a vampire movie that was very enjoyable to watch and very thematically relevant to the times we're living in. It uses the vampire as a metaphor in ways that I have not seen in many other places. And it's an indie film, and it has a production team that was proportionally largely women, so support it, and not just women, but women over 40, which in Hollywood is a big deal. It's not just young women, it's like older women and a lot of older women actors in the movie too. So, A Place Among the Dead by Juliet Landau will be screening this Saturday. I posted the link in the chat, or you can just go to my channel and find it, or I tweeted it like yesterday. You can find it there. I will be hosting the live Q&A stream after the movie with Juliet, the star and creator of the movie, and other actors from the movie. And that's what I'm excited about right now. So I hope you'll come. That is Saturday afternoon Eastern time / American time, or in the evening if you live overseas. Gothic homemaking. I should watch his YouTube channel. Thank you for telling me about it. Thank you all for joining me for the Vampire Book Club. Remember, next month we are reading The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Join my Discord server if you want to talk about the vampire book ahead of time. Otherwise, I will just see you here on my channel after. And more vampire reviews coming soon. More Vampire the Masquerade Coteries of New York live stream also coming soon. I'm sorry you came just as we're ending. Love you too, Paul. Good night.